Hi, I'm Paul Guppy. I am Vice President of the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular update of what's going on in Olympia. Right now, during the legislative session, we have just passed the most recent cutoff date, which was Wednesday, February 21st, and that was the last day for committee action in the House and the Senate to be taken on bills that had passed the opposite House and then be sent over. So now these bills are at the committee stage, but they're in the opposite House from where they started. In theory, any bill that has not been acted on in committee by this date is dead for the session, except for transportation related and budget related bills. But as I've mentioned before, no bill is ever dead until you get right to the very end of the session. Where we are in a 60-day session is day 48. So we're getting down to the last few weeks of the session, and this is when we begin to get a clear idea of exactly what bills are going to pass. Some bills that were bad for our state have already died. That particular was the tax increase bill that they considered last week. That's fairly confident because the sponsor of that bill himself announced that it wasn't going to pass this session. So that's very solid. Another bill that's out there is an increase in the real estate excise tax and what we consider at the Washington Policy Center a disastrous idea for the state, and that is statewide rent control. So the sponsors call it rent stabilization. So whenever you see a change in vocabulary that obscures what a bill is about, you can usually, that's an indicator that the sponsors are nervous about how the bill will be accepted by the public. That one's still alive. The big news, however, from last week is when House and Senate Democrat leaders, Senator Billig in the Senate and Lori Jenkins, Speaker in the House, together announced that they would hold hearings on 3 of the 6 popular initiatives that have been submitted to the legislature. These 6 initiatives, shockingly for the majority, qualified. Most of them got more than 100,000 signatures more than they needed to qualify. Our congratulations go to the Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, who certified, and they do sampling, they do a random count to make sure that the signatures are valid. Because each initiative had such a large margin, the Secretary of State moved fairly quickly. And by the end of January, he had certified all 6 of these initiatives to the legislature, in which case they are treated like regular bills. There was thinking that maybe the Democrats they don't like these ideas that are coming from the people might try to stonewall on all 6 of them. Instead, in encouraging news, as I said, state legislative leaders announced that they would allow hearings on 3 of them, and I'll run through those here in a minute. And then 3 of them they are not going to take up at all, and I'll describe what happens with those. So first of all, the 3 that they are going to hold hearings are Initiative 2081. This is the parental rights and transparency bill that would apply to schools. It would allow parents to have complete records, access to their own students' records, including health and medical services. There have been controversy about students going to the clinic at the school and then the parents don't know anything about that. That's a very sensitive area for any parent like myself. My wife and I would be horrified that some kind of medication or health procedure was happening with our child that we were not informed about. So that initiative is up. The same thing that initiative does is allow families to opt out of surveys and data collection regarding sensitive personal information. So again, parents at a number of schools have been surprised to find out that their 8th grader, middle schooler, high schooler, even kids that are younger than that are given a questionnaire about their personal life, not related to academics, but related to the child as a person or his family life or questions like that. And the school collects that information and doesn't even tell the parents about it. So this initiative would put an end to that. The hearing will be on February 28th, next week, at 8 to 9 a.m. in the Education and Early Learning and K-12 Committee. That's a joint hearing. So what I listed there was the House Committee and the Senate Committee will come together and have a joint meeting to hear this initiative. The next one that's going to be up for a hearing is Initiative 2111. This would reimpose, I should say, an income tax ban in Washington state at the state level and at the local level. The background of this issue is interesting. The people of Washington have voted over 90 years. They voted over 10 times to not enact an income tax in our state. In addition to that, there are about 28 jurisdictions, cities and counties, that have on their own enacted local income tax bans. What this initiative would do is impose a blanket ban on legislators at the state level, county level, city level to impose their own income tax. The Seattle City Council considered a city income tax recently. They didn't go through with it, but it was an idea that they had. The background of this is that the legislature, not only have the voters voted against proactive efforts on the ballot to enact an income tax, including constitutional amendments. Those have all been rejected. Most recently in 2010, that was voted down by 64%. Most people in the political area would consider that that no means no when it comes to an income tax. There was also a bipartisan law was passed in 1984, again, banning a state income tax. That was struck down by the Court of Appeals in 2019. Why they came along 34, 35 years later and struck down this perfectly good public policy is probably related to the political tilt of the court. All of that is background. If this initiative comes up and passes, then it will reenact the no income tax policy in our state. The hearing on that initiative is on February 27th at 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. in Olympia. It's also possible to sign up and testify online for those that are interested in that. And it will be a joint hearing of the House Finance Committee and the Senate Ways and Means Committee. The next item that was approved to go to a hearing is Initiative 2113 on police pursuit. It basically repeals a part of HB 1054 that was passed in 2021. Anyone who follows the news knows that this policy has been a disaster. It has really hamstrung the police. It changes the standard for the police to engage in pursuit from a reasonable suspicion to probable cause. And folks in the civil rights and legal area know that those two definitions, those bars, are very different. As a civil libertarian, Washington Policy Center does not think that the police should be authorized to do whatever they want, detain anybody, ask questions. There definitely should be rules to protect our rights. One of the indicators is police need to have a reason to engage in police pursuit, and it has to be reasonable. They have to have evidence that there is a DUI or some kind of crime has taken place, or a witness has indicated, those folks committed a crime, go chase them. The legislature in 2019 took that away and made the standard, as I mentioned, much higher than that. And to get to probable cause is very difficult. So it basically told the police that they can't do their job. The outcome of this, in practical terms, this was predictable, is every vehicle in the state became a four-wheeled safe house for criminals. Commit a crime, all you have to do is get in a car. As soon as you start driving, you're home free. The most interesting case of this was police in Chelan reported that someone stole a school bus and that the police could not chase the person and recover the school bus. I'm sure they resolved it eventually, but it was a little silly that the person just drove away with public property. Nobody could do anything about it. There's also, again, the kind of infamous case, which has been reported on the news, of one criminal engaged in being pursued by the police who called 911. So the criminal called 911. And complained that the police were violating HB 1054 and, quote, he's not allowed to chase me. So stories like this are multiplying on the news. Federal Way had a rash of almost 70 car break-ins and thefts in one night. And again, it's because criminals can escape easily. I think Democrats and Republicans realize that this policy is a mistake. And the hearing for that will be on February 28th at 9 o'clock in the morning. So 3 popular initiatives will go to hearings. That's a major concession on the part of leadership. It's good news because they're listening to what the public wants. We also assume that if they're allowing hearings, they will also allow floor action and roll call votes in the House and the Senate. These will be treated like regular bills. They just need a majority to pass. But given the way I've outlined these particular issues, I think it's safe to say that they will pass by large bipartisan majorities. As a people's initiative to the legislature, the governor's signature is not required. So Governor Inslee can't veto these. He's not going to sign them. His role is not needed. Once they get a majority in the legislature, they will become law. The other three initiatives are a different story. So those are, and I'll just list them here quickly. Initiative 2117 to repeal the carbon tax. Initiative 2109 to repeal the cap and gains income tax. And Initiative 2124 to allow people to opt out of the long-term care payroll tax. You notice there's a theme with all three of those. They are major tax increases that were passed in the last 2 or 3 years. Those are the ones that the Democrats don't want to give up. They're not even allowing hearings on them. So I think it's safe to say that there will be strong opposition to those from the Democratic side. We are already hearing about rumors about what the campaign would be. And we know that there will be, I can already reveal that there will be one message through the summer and fall as we go to the November ballot against these three initiatives that I mentioned. And that is, the state can't afford it. The state is strapped on money. K-12 education is going to be cut. Healthcare is going to be cut. Early learning programs are going to be cut. We've looked into this and none of those claims are true. So we expect a campaign that is basically going to be based on lies, that the state is short of money. It's not. The state and local governments in general have plenty of money, as I've reported before. Even in this mid-budget legislative session, lawmakers will be enacting billions of dollars of new spending to add to the current budget. We're also very confident that if these three initiatives were to pass in November and repeal the taxes that I mentioned, that none of those cuts will take place. So, but there will be a debate about that over the next couple of months. And again, voters will decide on those three initiatives when we get to November in the general election. So another piece of information that has come up related to Initiative 2117 to repeal the carbon tax is by far the largest financial hit because it increases the cost of energy and gasoline across the board. So there's going to be a lot of debate about it. The Democrats are proposing a bill right now in the legislature to send $200 rebate checks to all middle and low income families across the state. The Senate bill requires that these $200 checks be sent out in 2024, an election year, most likely before the November election. And this is clearly a bribe. What it's telling people is, hey, maybe the carbon tax is expensive, gas has gone up, but it's okay. We are going to send you a $200 check to help make up for it. The House version of the same proposal is a little different. It provides that half the money would be sent out before the election and the other half would be sent out after the election in 2025. However, this bill says if Initiative 2117 passes and the carbon tax is repealed, that second payment will never go out. So again, it's a bribe. It's essentially telling voters, but middle and low income voters, if you vote against 2117 and keep the carbon tax, then you get to have another check. If 2117 passes, carbon tax is repealed, you don't get your check. And that's pretty cynical politics. Todd Myers on our staff has looked into this, and what he noticed is none of this payment is related to the actual revenue that comes from the carbon tax. It's being paid for with other revenue. So even if the carbon tax were repealed, and cynically, the government could still send out $200 checks to everybody. But overall, we think this is a corrupting message to send to the public. It puts personal interest involved with making a public policy decision. We don't think it's best for our state. We also don't think it's going to work. So we think people are smarter to see through this. I could easily see a situation where people, and I've heard this happen in other countries, is take the bribe and then vote any way that you want. So it's possible that a lot of people will decide that's the way they're going to go. Next item is, I mentioned the bill in the past, HB 2150, which is an effort to keep Trump off the ballot in Washington state. That bill, we've been checking to see whether it's progressing or has any traction. The answer is no. It only has 3 co-sponsors, all Democrats. It's been assigned to the House State Government and Tribal Relations Committee and hasn't moved. Technically, it didn't meet the cutoff date, so it should be dead for the session. But this is such a large issue affecting the national election, we're going to keep an eye on it. If this bill were to move at the very end and be folded into the budget, for example, it means Washington would join Colorado and Maine in deciding whether Trump's name is going to appear on the ballot. The interesting constitutional question is, this is being challenged to the US Supreme Court. I think candidate Trump is fairly confident that he's going to win, but even separately from him is what it does to our system. So I've been hearing comments on both sides of the aisle that this is not the right approach to just keep somebody's name off the ballot. But from a governance point of view, what's interesting to us is in Maine, a county clerk made this decision. In Colorado, it was the state Supreme Court. If the US Supreme Court rules against them, it means that states will lose some of the discretion they have about qualifying for the ballot. In many people's minds, that goes against federalism, something that conservatives very much support. But the counter to that is if local officials abuse a power, they put that power at risk and they may lose it. And that could be what happens if the Supreme Court comes out as expected and tells Maine and Colorado that they can't go forward with that. And the same reasoning applies to the bill that I just mentioned. So the last item is new study we have coming up from Pam Lewison, our agricultural policy expert. She has looked into the latest agricultural census data that has come from the federal government, and she has found a sharp decline in the number of farms in Washington state. So since 2017, Washington has lost 3,700 farm operations in the state. She also has information about the average age of the farmer or rancher in our state, which is over 50. So both of those trends do not bode well for the future of agriculture in our state. It's a $12 billion industry as part of our economy. It's also part of our heritage going back to pioneer days. And Washington state is one of the largest food producers in the country. And this is an area that we think requires more attention from policymakers. It tends to be neglected, where there are positive things that lawmakers in Olympia can do to help agriculture. By the way, the first thing they could do is exempt agriculture from the carbon tax, which is technically how it's supposed to work, but hasn't happened yet. So energy cost in the agriculture sector is a major problem. So with that, I'll wrap up. That's our update for this week. As usual, we have our on-the-go live update online with David Bose hosting. That's on Tuesday next week, February 27th. And then further out on March 5th, our Young Professionals group is hosting a fun social in the Spokane area. So if you know of anyone that's interested there, you can check that out on our website. And with that, I will be back next week with another update. Thanks.